Let's come back. Between the book of Job, written about 210 BC, and the book of Daniel, written about 160 BC, is a time in that 50 years where the energies between Alexandria and the promised land of Judea especially began to take hold and have a powerful, colossal, explosive interchange. The documents that came out from that are torrential. And the first one is called the Vision of Enoch. And the Vision of Enoch is written about 196 BC. It comes at a time when all of a sudden, as if the phrase, "the cat is out of the bag," occurs, the presence of aliens on this planet becomes not only known, talk about science fiction vision, but becomes dystopic, which is also part of the science fiction vision. The written revelation of that beginning, and the book of Enoch eventually would have 5 parts, but the thumb was missing. Only 4 of the 5 parts, only the fingers, occur at what was beginning to be developable in what then was the future. And the documents collected of what then was to be in the future is our distant past. It is the community at Qumran on the shores of the Dead Sea. And in the great tragedy that happened to the Qumran community, natural tragedy, a catastrophe, in 31 BC, an earthquake of unbelievable exactness and proportions sent a fracture through the Qumran community, exactly through the central building of the Qumran community, which was the scriptorium, where they copied book after book by the hundreds, almost into 1,000 volumes. 4 of the sections of the book of Enoch are there in the fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls. One of them is not there because it had not been written yet in 31 BC. And that earthquake fracture not only sent a ground lightning split through the scriptorium, but it fractured the pool of water and the steps going down to that pool of water, where there was a baptismal quality of cleansing in the Dead Sea community, and the whole community was abandoned. Until 60 years later, 6-0, that 5 times 12, that quintessential 12th tribe collection. It is in 29 AD that the Qumran community is reinstated, and the reinstatement of the Qumran community is epical. And the figure who reinstated the Qumran community did so by reinstating baptism, but not in the community limited to it, but expansive, and taking not just a little pool of water that had been struck by earth lightning, that ends now, and something further, something more expansive will begin when the vision is matured. And when the vision is matured, the baptism will begin again, but this time in the Jordan River that feeds with fresh water the Dead Sea, and no longer on the edge of a Dead Sea, but at the way in which the fruitful living waters from Mount Hermon's melting snow comes all the way there to this special ford in the Jordan River. And the person who reinstated the expanded, completely recalibrated Qumran was John the Baptist. And he did it in such a way that it initiated the last 7-year cycle. So that from 29 AD to 36 AD, in that final Sabbath week of years, John the Baptist refounded and expanded, recalibrated community that was originally set up by the teacher of vision wisdom, to its culmination with the crucifixion and resurrection of John the Baptist's younger cousin, Jesus. We are looking at the way in which a carrier wave has catastrophic preludes. It has long preparation that finally, when it comes to register, nothing in cultures or in the quality of constructs of civilization affects it. It's called when the day comes, that's the day. We live in a time where that day is right pronto, and that its trigger was in 1991. And all of us who are here were quite conscious of an extraordinary aspect. When in massive desert camouflage with gas masks, tens of thousands of troops entered into southern Iraq, where all of the almost 700 oil wells were set on fire, so that plumes, columns, a forest of black smoke of burning oil darkened the entire day for days. The land of Sargon and Eneduana was under a pall of technological night, of end of the aeon triggering, whose aftershocks is still going on to this day, to this hour. And that in between that, the dawn in Jerusalem, in the Promised Land, is tuned to the dawn in Kabul, in what is today, conveniently, Afghanistan. And that there is a hidden quality of dimensions of civilization that is hardly guessable and received a deceptive bad guess When I was born in October of 1940, the Nazi commandeering of the Aryan race as being sophisticated and needed to eliminate the Semitic Jewish race is a massive evil, a catastrophic misunderstanding, civilizations deep, of what the time forms actually are being the metronome of, not in some basic repeatable cycle. It's not about a repetition. It's about a spiraling that increases in two chiral ways. One, it goes further and further in to the infinitesimally small, and the other further and further out to the infinitely large. On the net, Science Daily, one can find almost daily. What does one find? Closing in on the border between primordial plasma and ordinary matter at the Large Hadron Collider just outside of Geneva. Curiously, it's only a bicycle's ride of a couple of hours at most from the estate where Voltaire and his lady of many, many years, Madame de Châtelet, worked on making a translation of the Latin of Isaac Newton's Principia Mathematica into an elegant French, so that it was the elegant French of that generation who were able to read Newton freshly, not in that stilted Latin which was used for the original Principia, but in this Voltairean quality of elegant, Madame du Châtelet's great quality of penetrating exactness and elegance herself, that a whole generation of French mathematical geniuses and French geniuses of changing civilization all took place. So that the development of Fourier's series in mathematics, the development of Lagrange's understanding of gravity and Lagrange points where gravity between the bodies and the sun even out so that there is very little gravity exactly at those 5 Lagrange spots, and by 2018 at L2 we will have the most powerful scientific instrument ever built, the James Webb Space Telescope, that will make Hubble look like a toy. And it will be positioned 1 million miles off the surface of the Earth. And what is space? It's a point of rest that was understood by Madame de Châtelet and Voltaire through Newton, that this is exactly where one can come to a new beginning. Out of this rest is not a dead rest. It is a living, fertile beginning. It is a fertile zero. It is a cooperative infinity. And at the same time that one had this generation of great French mathematicians, Newtonians all, coming into play, one had the development in France of the French Revolution. that tore everything down. What royals? What privilege? What hegemony? What heritage do you have that we do not have? We are citizens of man. And this is year one. In England, William Blake's prophetic vision quality was operative in coming into play, and the great prophetic books of Blake, the great prophetic poetry of Shelley, and the great prophetic novels of Mary Shelley, all of this coming out and coming forth, the quality of the old Benjamin Franklin saying, "At last I can leave this France in good hands because it's going to all be taken care of, all of it, because Mr. Jefferson is coming to take over from me." And he did. All of this is waves upon waves of preludes increasing in its scope, and always there is this quality of the aliens among us. A seminar on the book of Enoch in its fivefold quintessential qualities has been held for the last every 3 years or so. This is Enoch and Qumran Origins. Gabriele Boccassini, who is at University of Michigan. And a couple of years later, a couple of meetings later, half a dozen years later, Enoch and the Messiah, Son of Man. Because in addition to the original vision of Enoch is a second vision of Enoch that is not in the Dead Sea Scrolls, that wasn't written in 31 BC, because the author of the second vision of Enoch was only born in 31 BC. He was born at the same time. Who knows, the same month? Could it be the same day that the earth lightning struck an end to the Essene community? Not to kill it, but to give it a pause, that phase, that stage is over. And he grew up to be Joseph, the father of Jesus. And when Jesus was 12, already beginning his bar mitzvah preparation year, which is why they discovered that he wasn't with the caravan returning back to their craft community. Nazareth was not a city, it was never even a village. It was a craft community because they were all rebuilding Sepphoris, the great city in that valley, which was the capital at that time, that whole section of Palestine. So they went back, and Joseph found him in the temple, arguing, because he was not only receiving instructions pertaining to his year of preparation for the bar mitzvah, he was giving instructions at the same time. And so Joseph recognized that it was time for the 12-year-old genius Jesus to go back to where he was brought up for the first 5 years of his life, back to Alexandria. And so he wrote the second vision of Enoch. Enoch and the Messiah, Son of Man, because the three parables in the second vision of Enoch are the 1, 2, 3 parable preparation of Jesus and the way he would teach the rest of his life. And the way that he was sent back to Alexandria was not overland. He was sent by ship by a Semitic-owned trading route on the Mediterranean, not only the coasts, but across the Mediterranean. It had been Semitically owned for thousands of years at that time. It was there when Sargon and Enkiduanna founded that whole quality of Akkad, reaching out all the way to Cyprus and all the way to the Indus River valleys. And all of this was launched from Tyre, Tyre. Because it is at Tyre that the original exploring port of mariners on the Mediterranean Sea, Mediterranean means the Middle Sea, the Middle Sea of the middling of the world, of the way in which fulcrum after fulcrum come to a place where the top pivot spins here. And Tyre had been that for almost 2 millennia. Tyre was not located exactly on the coast. It was on an island off the coast. So that one had to take shuttle boats about a mile or so out to the island, and the great mariner exploring empire of the city of Tyre was from that little island. And it was never conquered until someone named Alexander the Great was as determined to succeed as anything would ever stand in his way, and he built patiently a mole of rocks and debris out to the island of Tyre, and by linking it, sent his legions over and conquered. And got the idea when he saw the island of Pharos off the Egyptian coast, we're going to make a mole in commemorative of the way in which we took over the Tyre millennial long, aeon long shipping rate of the whole Mediterranean out into the Atlantic Ocean. The sailors from Tyre founded Carthage 800 BC. They founded what became Marseille 600 BC. By the time of Pythagoras, they were already beginning to sail out through the Straits of Gibraltar. And eventually, in Ptolemaic times, when the 72 translators were put on the island of Pharos to translate the Hebrew Bible into Greek, it's still published. The Septuagint, the 70. There's a new translation now that is even better than the one that we all used for the last 50 years or more, just now. That quality of the resonances, when they are put into a harmonic set, now you can make music. You can compose a civilization that has that musical elegance, that architectural capacity to inspire and not just stand there, but to dynamically bring all who come into participation with that scalar of perfection. Now one can have something which we will live to see, a new Jerusalem, as a planetary park, like a national park of the planet, of the species, that belongs to everyone and not just to someone. Not just to those, not those others. To these, but not to those. It will be a part of the way in which the family of man finally grows up and stops hating and killing for only reasons of deception and ignorance and stupidity, including the aliens. They will have to learn as well. Because there are star system civilizations beyond count that know them very well for the kind of cheap, piratical, tyranny-loving, deceptive critters that they apparently are very proud to be. Pride cometh before the fall, and that fall comes like earth lightning rather quickly. The vision, the phrase in the book of Revelation, behold, I come quickly, real soon. The quality in the book of Daniel and the quality in the book of Job are like great parentheses that have the development of Qumran. The Essenes had taken umbrage against the increasing encroachments of the Persian Empire reaching to try to take over everything into its empire under Antiochus IV, and for 20 years they were wondering, how do we begin and where do we begin? And exile had taken them into Damascus, and from Alexandria, the teacher of vision, wisdom, contacted them and brought them back to the site where Qumran would be and established there the community. And not only the community of a few who would keep a vigilance in a new calendar, the calendar of the book of Jubilees. Come the Jubilee, that's the day. And come the set of the Jubilees that brings the harvest full, the harvest is in. Those who will eat, partake. There's a Hopi myth about catastrophes that happened to the ancestors in the deep southwest in ancient times. That the grasshoppers came because there was so much to eat, and they were eating everything, and the Hopi people had a little message from small creatures, the smallest of creatures, that tough times were going to come, and one would have to, don't join the locusts, join the ants. And we'll all tighten our belts, and that's why ants have such a tiny little waist, because you had to tighten your belt to that. And there was a time when the locusts had eaten all of their food, and there was no more food, and they all died off. Extinction. And the ants survived. And the ancient saying, the will of the ant is a truth of nature. We have, fortunately, people like the author of The Interpretation of Dreams in the Ancient Near East, with a translation of an Assyrian dream book. A. Leo Oppenheim was a great professor in Chicago, at the University of Chicago. When the University of Chicago was set up, Chicago was the upcoming great city in the world. It wasn't on the East Coast or the West Coast, it was in the center of the continent. All the railroads were built so that all the railroads met in Chicago. The freight yards in Chicago were like Grand Central Station for the commerce of a burgeoning Renaissance United States. Not only the economy, but the art. And the University of Chicago was set up to be, from the get-go, like building San Francisco, or later on building Johns Hopkins University outside of Baltimore, or building Stanford, to be world-class. And the Oriental Institute was financed by great expeditions that were sent to bring back enough of the Egyptian materials, enough of the Assyrian materials, of the Mesopotamian, of the Akkadian, so that the Oriental Institute, at the time headed by J. Leo Oppenheim, his great book near the end of his life, Ancient Mesopotamia, Portrait of a Dead Civilization, that subsets of civilization can die because they have no more food to feed that subset. It isn't that civilization dies, it's that the subsets that were not wise without vision, they quickly perish. The prophetic word behold is extremely important, and next presentation we'll talk about the book of Daniel, where Daniel is so powerful in his wisdom. He is able to teach the visioning quality, but the learner of the visions did not have them originally, but only did it through a method inculcation, a kind of a false learning that gave a false vision, so that one could only have a vision within a dream, not the real McCoy, which is the ability to go from dreaming and thinking you know about vision to really having vision access on a scalar that is infinite. The phrase in Egyptian, from eternity to eternity. Oppenheim's death prevented him from finishing his second edition, and so Erica Reimer finished it for him. She succeeded him at the University of Chicago and the Oriental Institute, and in 1977 his original book was revised, now almost 40 years later. All of this material is extremely valuable. Who published this? Transactions of the American Philosophical Society, held at Philadelphia, for promoting useful knowledge, founded by Benjamin Franklin. Still publishing, still operating. There's a sub-basement room in the Huntington Library, where one whole wall of this room are all the issues of the American Philosophical Society's transactions, thousands of them, for almost 300 years. It has nothing to do with political parties. It has to do with a Hermetic America that goes back exactly to what we are talking about as origins. More next week.